6 years ago, Steve Dew Jones hitchhiked from the UK to Malaysia with his friend. He not only survived, but he enjoyed it. He gave us a great talk at Night of Adventure about that journey. Now, he's married to his wife, Jo. He has recently returned from hitchhiking from the bottom of Argentina all the way to Alaska with his wife. The couple followed the same rules on this trip. Number 1, never pay for transport. Number 2, never refuse an offer. Please welcome Steve.
When does the timer start? There we go. Okay, so 2 years ago today, literally today, we flew down to the bottom tip of Argentina. This is Tierra del Fuego, the bottom of it. And we started hitchhiking north with the aim of getting to Alaska by the end of the year. That's roughly 20,000 kilometers if you go in a straight line. We did it in 40,000. Plenty of challenges along the way. Not least, on our very first day, was the Patagonian wind. It is absolutely extraordinary. And on this particular spot, where we had to wait longer than normal in Patagonia, our drivers had to actually reverse back to get us, because we couldn't actually walk to get to them. Our tent is under our baggage there, otherwise it would be flying in our faces. It's also an incredibly desolate place. You don't see many people at all. It's beautiful. The scarcity of different colors is beautiful, actually. But Jo, apart from being tucked up from the wind, is wondering if we're ever going to see anyone, because we've been there for a little while and there's just nobody around. And if it gets dark, then it might be a bit scary. Saying that, you also get occasions where you're a bit frustrated by the presence of others. In Patagonia, rather bizarrely and unexpectedly, you get competition when hitchhiking. There are 3 Israelis there. They're everywhere in Patagonia. And we had to wait for them to get a ride before we could. Fortunately, it's almost always the case that in Patagonia it's extremely easy to hitchhike. Further north in Argentina, this wasn't the case. This was our first real challenge of the trip, where we waited there that's about 4 hours in. Half an hour later, the sun would go down, and we were forced to find accommodation in this tiny little village to the right. It's not that much fun when you've got to wait for a significant amount of time, and you can't stop thinking negative thoughts about the people. But the very next day, who should we meet but Sergio and Maria, their 4-year-old daughter, Julieta. And we would go with them on their holiday from Buenos Aires. We didn't start there, but they picked us up along the way. For 10 days, driving with them to Bolivia, where they were going just to visit for on holiday. They took us with them. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Why would you do that? Bolivia, a completely different kettle of fish. Most of our time was spent in the back of trucks, not speaking with drivers at all, which defeats the object of hitchhiking completely. My major love of hitchhiking comes from the fact that you talk with drivers, you get to know people, you talk about the culture, what do you do, what do you like, what do you not like. Bolivians don't like people, just shove you in the back. Brazil, completely opposite. These guys love people, and we were surrounded by people all the time, stayed with a bunch of Brazilians who invited us into their home. I think our first 7 days, we had someone invite us for a meal with them, complete stranger. Also enjoyed the World Cup. So that was brilliant. Also had, I think, hopefully I'm right in the next slide, yep, our favorite ride, my favorite ride of the entire trip, with 7 goats in rural Brazil. One of them did come loose at one stage, though, and I can honestly say that was the scariest part of the entire trip for me, so I fended it off with a spade that you can just see there, and a foot, a bit like that. There were also other moments on the trip where we had to wait for significant periods of time. We were to remain in this petrol station for 4 hours, very shortly before the sun came down. And this is an extremely busy petrol station. People passing you every 5 seconds. You just can't stop thinking, you are a terrible person. You are also a terrible person. But I think what I've noticed, this was southern Brazil, which is quite rich. What I've come to think is the case is that the richer a place, the harder it is to hitchhike, for some reason or other. People just don't want to take the risk or something. This one, completely different though. This is later on in Brazil. We'd had 24 hours in a truck, and there were a few rides like that where you just went for 1,000 kilometers and made you feel a lot better. Another thing to make you feel very good, just got into Ecuador, and as would be the case in Ecuador, kindness after kindness, so easy to hitchhike. And these guys even gave up their seats for us and went on the top with our bags. It was our very first ride, and this is literally the border post is about here. I heard this truck coming, didn't think we'd see one for a while, and ran out and got the truck. Also in Colombia, these 2 soldiers, 19-year-olds, stopped a truck for us and got us a ride. So we were told... we were told all the time that we should be scared. All the time. Brazil particularly, Peru particularly, Colombia, by the people. Oh, peligroso, peligroso. They just kept telling us, not a chance. It was more dangerous in the States. And this was our biggest challenge probably on the whole trip. Brought Joe to tears. And this was hitchhiking in the States on the freeway entrances, which are your best bet because they don't really have service stations that you can wait at typically on the freeways. So it's freeway entrances. But this one, this occasion, we're actually walking on the freeway because we've been waiting at the freeway entrance for 3.5 hours. And the locals were all telling us, you're not going to get picked up here. We're in the middle of nowhere. So we walked on the freeway. Unfortunately, did get picked up, but later had a bit of a run-in with a cop, and that didn't do Joe's nerves any good at all. On to a different challenge completely in a second. This is a signpost on the so-called Highway of Tears in Canada. And it's called the Highway of Tears. This is a bit serious now, because something like 40 girls were abducted over a 40-year stretch, all hitchhiking. So I took my wife on this. So, but we survived, so screw you. But it was also extremely cold in Canada, as you can imagine and see here. I'm not very happy there. We were to wait in this spot, actually our last hitchhike of the entire trip, remarkably, given that we're 1,000 kilometers from the Alaska border. This was -18, and we only waited for 45 minutes, but let me tell you, 45 minutes standing still at -18, not that much fun. But it's the very same spot. Up comes Chuck Pinkerton from Alaska in his truck. You can just see Alaska, maybe, if you look closely on the number plate. And we honestly couldn't believe it. We were expecting about 3 days, maybe 4 days, if we were lucky, to get to Alaska, and then a bit more to get to the end of the road. But with Chuck Pinkerton, we drove through stunning scenery on the Alaska Highway, and then through Alaska. I think we went with him for something like 600 miles in all. I drove some of it, which was flipping brilliant. We saw the Northern Lights, saw this sort of scenery. I think this is in Alaska. I can't be sure. It's all pretty similar around the northern Canada bit. And this definitely is Alaska. This is the Kenai Peninsula where we ended. And it felt like we'd come full circle, because this is called the Cook Inlet, the water, not the little puddle, but beyond that. And we started at the Beagle Channel. And in fact, there's a Cook Bay as well on Tierra del Fuego, so it really felt right. And it just so happened that Chuck lived at the so-called end of the road in Homer, Alaska. Thanks very much.